Welcome everyone to today's Synergist webinar, Coronavirus, Practical Guide for Those That Power Our World, FR/AR Clothing and FR Cloth Face Coverings. I'm Kay Bechtold, Managing Editor of the Synergist, the magazine of AIHA. I'd like to thank all of our attendees and especially Bulwark for sponsoring today's webinar. I want to share a quick reminder for attendees to please keep conversation in the chat on topic during the presentation. Our speaker today is Derek Singh, the Technical Training Manager for Bulwark Protection. Derek has more than 25 years of experience in the flame-resistant clothing industry in a variety of roles and has assisted in both developing and implementing programs for some of the largest companies worldwide. In his position at Bulwark Protection, Derek has developed over 40 hours of training curriculum for Bulwark Institute, covering all aspects of flame-resistant and arc-rated clothing. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Derek.
Kay, thank you as always for that kind introduction. And good morning and or good afternoon, live or archived, however you're choosing to listen today. I want to sincerely thank you all for taking your valuable time to join us to talk about something, well, if you told me 10 months ago, I would never have thought I'd be talking about. But as the title says, we're going to talk a little bit about coronavirus, COVID-19, and really more about a practical guide for folks that have to wear the flame-resistant arc-rated clothing that we make and keep the lights on, keep gasoline flowing, keep all those things that are keenly important to us happening. So with that, let's get the attorneys out of the way. This presentation is for informational purposes only. Customers of Bulwark Protective Brands are solely responsible for conducting their own hazard risk assessment to identify safety hazards in their work environment. Customers of Bulwark Protective Brands are solely responsible for selecting appropriate garments and protective gear for their employees and ensuring wearers use the garments and protective gear properly and in conjunction with appropriate gloves and footwear. Because working conditions and other factors may vary, Bulwark Protective Brand does not make any representation that these garments and protective gear will protect wearers from injury. So really what this came about was as we're going into March and April and we started hearing all about what was going on in the world and everything started rapidly changing, we were moving production facilities into starting to make medical gowns, and all these things were happening over the summertime. We started getting a lot of questions, and we started getting a lot of questions around we're wearing your PPE in and around what concerns should we have and what should we do about those concerns, and then how do we adopt into some of these new applications, for example, flame-resistant cloth face coverings that we'll talk about. So what do you want to take away today? Well, really just some of the basics. And when we're talking about SARS-CoV-2, how to neutralize the coronavirus, what are some best practices regarding your flame-resistant arc-rated clothing during this time, and what should you look for when selecting a flame-resistant cloth face covering, aka what is being commonly known, but incorrectly, as an FR mask. So a few definitions real quick. Severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2. SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. COVID-19 is the disease. Flame resistant, when we talk about that here in the context, that is a property of the actual garments themselves. They will self-extinguish. They will not support combustion. They will not melt and drip and add to the injury. The acronym that we use for the umbrella is FR/AR. FR for flame resistant because all our arc-rated garments, which is the AR piece, first of all start out as flame resistant. So flame resistant first, ARs when we do additional testing to see how it will perform in an arc flash. So you have flame resistant arc-rated garments. FRCFC, that is our flame-resistant cloth face covering. It is a flame-resistant version of what you're seeing in and around every day as a cloth face covering. As I mentioned earlier, these are not masks and or face protection. When we talk about cleaning, that refers to the removal of germs, dirt, and impurities from surfaces. It does not kill germs. Disinfecting refers to the use of a method such as chemicals or ultraviolet light to kill germs on surface. This process, though, does not necessarily clean dirty surfaces. So just a few definitions there as we climb into this, so to speak. So you'll see that most of my slides, we've gone to at least provide links and references to when we're talking about, because not a doctor, not a medical professional, but in and around what we do, and that's what I'm hoping to connect it to. So what is a coronavirus? Viruses, of course, are not alive. Viruses are infectious agents, not living organisms, and can multiply only in a living cell. Novel coronavirus, we have no immunity to. It's not a bacteria. It's not a single-cell organism. It basically hijacks living, which become host cells, to then replicate and infect the host. So how does it do that? How does the novel coronavirus infect a cell? Well, due to its unique features, and we've all seen this spiky little ball all over the place, the virus is particularly good at infecting new cells, both in the upper respiratory tract as well as deeper down into the lungs. The virus enters through the nose or mouth, where it begins its infection. The outer spike protein of the coronavirus latches onto specific receptors on the surface of cells in the respiratory tract. The binding triggers the process by which the virus fuses into human cells. And that's where it does what viruses do. So what do we know about transmission? And at the very basics and what we've learned, the respiratory viruses are transmitted in multiple ways. We know of contact transmission. It's spread through direct contact with an infectious person, touching during a handshake, or an article or surface that has been contaminated. We heard early on about the various life cycles of the virus on variety of different, from formica to copper, from cardboard and plastics, in order to infect. Droplet transmission is probably the most that we've heard about, because that's where we are looking at the majority of the focus is minimizing the droplets. You've all seen the literature. I wear my mask to protect you. You wear your mask to protect me. We've seen what the CDC and what the WHO have said regarding how to utilize and why we're utilizing the masks, and what they're really designed to knock down the transmission of droplets, because we're constantly moving water vapor in and out as we talk, speak, yell. We've heard about super spreader events where people have been in close proximity of those that are shouting or singing, or, again, putting water vapor into the environment. Airborne transmission, we've seen some discussion on. This is infection spread through exposure to those viruses contain respiratory droplets, compromise of smaller droplets. We've heard, and it's put into discussion, the 6-foot rule and time, and it's been added to the concerns. But overall, this is kind of where we have been focused over the last really 8 to 10 months, and the general populace, as we've learned more and more and more and more has been communicated to us about what is happening with transmission. So the principal mode by which people are infected with SARS, COVID-19 being the disease, is through exposure to respiratory droplets carrying the infectious virus. The epidemiology of SARS-CoV-2 indicates that most infections are spread through close contact, not so much as far as airborne transmission has been going on. So that's why we're still focusing on getting people away from people and minimizing that. So how do we destroy this virus? Well, even back early on, and you can still go see the YouTube with Dr. Price, and the reason we got connected originally when it first came out, and it was so impactful, is because the Weill Cornell Medical Center is actually where our burn nurse, our burn expertise, that's where one of our top speakers when we do our outside of conferences, that's where she's housed, in the burn center there. So when Dr. Price first got on and pleaded his case to his family to talk about what this new virus was they were encountering, it was very impactful. And the reason is he termed it back then, and when you look at how we can counteract this thing, it is not very, very, and he called it in his words, COVID is a wimp if you do the right things consistently. Time will affect it. It dries out and the virus becomes inactive. Disinfectants have a huge impact on it. Bleach, alcohol, etc. destroy the virus. But again, it may not be appropriate for all surfaces and applications, and they don't remove the virus. Soap and water has been excellent, and we'll talk a little bit more about how effective that is, and even in some cases may be more effective than sanitizers because it can be used on multiple surfaces, and it destroys and ultimately removes the virus. And that's what really allowed us to communicate to the folks that wear our shirts, pants, coveralls for PPE to help mitigate some of their concerns as we were going through the early stages of this. So how does soap destroy the coronavirus? Well, the virus in and of itself is made up of a membrane, an oily lipid molecule, which is studded with these little proteins that we've all become so familiar with that help it attach and ultimately infect other cells. So you have the little spiky protein, you have the lipid membrane, which is protecting all that genetic material, which ultimately causes the harm. So as we look at what soap does, when we introduce soap molecules into the virus's environment, a soap molecule has a hydrophilic head, which bonds with water, and we have a hydrophobic tail, which likes to avoid water and really likes bonding with oil and fat. So you have a hybrid molecule here that is going to look for that fatty membrane, and then the hydrophilic head gets to do something that's actually pretty cool. So when the soap molecule comes in contact with the virus, those little tails like to attach to the fat, but that big head is still wiggling around. So what happens is, in the most simple of terms, is you have these heads that are moving and these tails that are anchored, and you end up tearing that fatty membrane open, which then releases all that genetic material on the inside and ends up destroying the virus. So the Zen soap does what it likes to do, and that's where these little tiny bubbles that you create in the agitation phase, when you take your soap and you agitate it up and you get all that sudsy water, those micelles, that's when they surround these viruses and they get washed away with the water. So that's why they've been telling you since day one, wash your hands in warm to hot water for 20 seconds, because soap does an excellent job of making that virus inactive, and then, unlike sanitizers, actually removes it from the surface that you're washing. So as more and more people are being impacted by the coronavirus, the question of how to properly home wash flame-resistant arc-rated garments was obviously brought up. And what was good for us is adhering to the laundry instructions, the manufacturer's guidelines across all. It involves washing in hot water for the length of a laundry cycle, which is going to be greater than the 20 seconds that it takes you to remove it from your hands. So following the instructions from the manufacturer in concert with the CDC directions for anyone handling potentially exposed clothes is going to be the best plan of action. So even though we were able to communicate that you don't have to do anything different in order to take care of your PPE, there was still some thought had to be put into these are extenuating circumstances. These are situations to where we have to maybe go above and beyond. What can we communicate to our end users, our wearers, if they get into dealing with, obviously, chlorine bleach? And that was the big one. And our friends over at Tyndale, Tyndale USA is one of our customers, and one of my colleagues, Scott Margolin over there, took the extra steps to go and test what we traditionally tell people not to do, to avoid at all costs, and that's having your flame-resistant arc-rated clothing encounter chlorine bleach. Because why? These were extenuating circumstances. These were times of that was unknown, and we knew that people were going to be doing stuff that they would not traditionally do. So Tyndale went to the extent of going above and beyond the CDC's recommendations, which was to have 1/3 a cup of chlorine per gallon of water to use as a sanitizing in a diluted bleach spray type application to wipe down equipment. And what would happen if you got incidental splash, or if you were mixing this up and it got onto your flame-resistant arc-rated clothing? Even though ideally what we wanted you to do is stop what you're doing, get out of your very expensive flame-resistant arc-rated clothing, be in an area where you're not exposed to thermal hazards when you're washing down your equipment, cleaning your equipment, sanitizing your equipment. But if you happen to get in an area that you weren't accustomed to and you were doing these things, what could your expectations be? So Tyndale even upped the ante further, and they went to 2/3 cup of chlorine bleach per gallon of water, and they went ahead and actually conducted ASTM 6413 test methodology to see if the FR properties of the fabrics were going to be impaired, reduced, potentially hazardous. So we have no bleach, we have a small spill, we have 1 pump of this 2/3 of a cup per gallon, 3 pumps, and then we have where we've actually dipped the fabric in there and we tested it. The good news is across all of these, when they went into the cabinet and we applied the vertical flame test, and if you're not aware of that, that is a 12-second exposure to an open flame, and then the flame is shut off. The fabric has to self-extinguish, put itself out, and it has to retain a certain char length, meaning that it must be less than 6 inches. Some test protocols are 4, but for this one it was 6 inches, and the corresponding results. The good news is across all exposures, even all the way up to soaked, from no bleach, this is how it works all the time, to a spill, 1 pump, 3 pumps, to soaked, they all passed. The key here is they did what they're designed to do. They self-extinguished, and the char length would have still passed the test protocol. So the integrity, or the fact that these garments are going to do what they're designed to do, was reinforced, even though we were doing the one thing that we tell you not to do, and that's expose it to chlorine bleach. Now, we know these are unique times. When these times are done, when go back to not exposing your flame-resistant clothing to chlorine bleach. But what we wanted you to know, if you have incidental contact with it, you weren't ruining, $80, $90, $100 shirts, pants, and coveralls because you slightly got a little bit of diluted chlorine bleach on them. So that was good to know. So as I said, based on all the studies that and information from our good friends at Tyndale USA, we were able to see that these did continue to do their primary job. What's the new thing that we all encountered? Now we were being asked as a marketplace, guys, we need masks. We have the additional hazard of short duration thermal events. We need to have masks. And we're like, well, these aren't masks. These are cloth face coverings. Well, then they go, we need flame-resistant cloth face coverings, guys. We can't be going into potential thermal exposures with something that is meltable. And when you looked at everything that was coming out, if you look at disposable masks, they're pretty much 100% meltable. If you look at homemade versions, they're going to be made of stuff that may ignite. I made it out of a cotton T-shirt. It may be something that's 65-35. The ear loops on it. Everything was potentially unable to be transferred to the folks that wear our shirts, pants, and coveralls to do their job. It still had to have self-extinguishing, non-melting, and dripping properties. Cloth face coverings, more than likely, you'll see them with an arc rating. Now, the arc rating in and of itself is inconsequential. It is not vital to the fact that and why you're using it, because it is a cloth face covering. It is not PPE, but we need to give you confidence because it's made from the same fabrics that your shirts and pants are. It will have an arc rating. It will have an ATPV. It will have potentially an E sub BT. Some way, shape, or form, it's going to have an arc rating. That's just to give you the confidence that it's going to do what it's designed to do, and that's self-extinguish, not melt, drip, or add to the injury, because in and of itself, it is just there to provide a blocker, if you want to use that term, a reducer of water vapor when you're in close proximity with your colleagues. In addition, NFPA 2112, ASTM 1506, which are the primary standards for flash fires, short duration thermal events from fire, and our arc flashes, have fast-forwarded and fast-tracked revisions into updates and TIAs, and will go into any future revisions as far as letting people basically know, look, if your shirt has an arc rating, if your shirt is NFPA 2112, and you are making cloth face coverings from that fabric, it's going to carry over. So it was a way to fast track if you want to look at compliant to the standards that you're going to want to implement in your environment if you're an electrical worker or you're in oil and gas refineries or chemicals where NFPA 2112 is going to be there, NFPA 70E or OSHA 1910 269. So traditional masks versus flame-resistant arc-rated cloth face coverings. So obviously there's a whole scope, and if I apologize early if I misspeak on really nailing down the difference between respirators, masks, and cloth face coverings. But we do know what the difference is when we talk about our cloth face coverings. They have flame-resistant properties. These are not masks. They're not designed as respirators, but there are some things that you want to be aware of, take note of. When it comes to the fabric, the tightness of the weave is crucial. Depending on where you and what you read on filtration, at a bare minimum, if you can see through it, probably not going to be on the high end as far as you would like it to be. The tighter the weave, the harder it is to see through. If you can't see the outlines of the individual fibers, it's probably going to be a better actor of what you're looking for it to do. Non-FR and or FR cloth face coverings are not designed as face protection. They're not designed to replacing balaclavas and other protective gear when we're in and around energized equipment. They're designed to reduce the transmission of coronavirus by limiting the ability to touch one's face and to impede the contribution of expired droplets and aerosols into the environment. And that's it. It's not designed to replace anything that you would normally wear a respirator for, and or, as I said earlier, in our electrical environment when we're looking to implement balaclavas, for example, with an arc-rated face shield when we're doing energized electrical work under NFPA 70E or 1910-269. So why cloth face coverings? Obviously, fluid droplets are continuously being exhaled, inhaled, and deposited and transferred. Cloth face coverings mitigate that and the transmission of the virus by doing what? They minimize the ability for you to take your dirty hands and get up in and close to your nose and or mouth. They reduce the droplets inhaled. They reduce droplets exhaled into the environment. Reduce droplets in the travel distance. If you have a sneeze or a cough and you're wearing that, it's going to knock it down. And they reduce droplets deposited on surfaces. Now, obviously, there's a full range of discussion points on these particular bullet points as far as being universally accepted. Completely understand that, but as we were putting this together and when we were talking to at the time and place in the field as we're rolling this out to our wearers, what information could be mutually agreed upon as being the most accurate for the time, this is what we were given to take to the folks that were looking to us for advice. FR cloth face coverings for us were not easy. I mean, we're not mask builders. We had to attempt a balance of one, protection, and protection from us was not introducing a meltable, not introducing something that could ignite, especially when you're talking about in and around the face. Just in an arc flash situation alone, when you're dealing with thousands of degrees, you could easily see how something could ignite and or worse, melt, and we don't want that being on the face. So when we started looking at how to build these, first and foremost, as we look at anything, before we start looking at comfort, before we start looking at durability, we must first make sure that it's not going to contribute to any injury. So we wanted to look at there. Second was filtration. And what information we were getting there was obviously the tighter the weave, you're going to have some filter capabilities. Now, obviously understand from the side, from the top, from the bottom, if you're not wearing them properly, if you're one of those folks who likes to wear it as a chin cup, that all kind of goes out the window. But when we were evaluating what fabrics to start with, as were my colleagues who were responding to this overwhelming demand for this new product, we were looking at building it with the tightest weave possible and being able to breathe. So again, we want to be able to breathe through it. We want it to have some comfort, and then it also had to have some structural integrity. And you've seen, I mean, if we looked at how these cloth face coverings have evolved, even in our home cottage industries that we have in our neighborhood, how sophisticated some of the patterns have gotten to where there's structural integrity. You can see there's a nose area, there's a chin area, there's a place in which, you know, our lips aren't touching the mask, etc. We've come and done quite a few things to enhance and complement that over time. So we've gotten better. With that, flame-resistant arc-rated cloth face coverings, what would you consider how to safely and properly use these? Is it safe to breathe through? Well, first and foremost, regardless if it's a flame-resistant cloth face covering or it's a cloth face covering you got down at the local swap meet, wash everything first. Why? Because fabrics have dyes, finishes, sizes, etc. on there, and you don't want to be breathing through that. In our FR world, you want to look at who you're sourcing it from. Do they already go beyond the standards in their shirts, pants, and coveralls, their traditional workwear? Do they comply with OEKO text? Do their suppliers know who Okeotex 100 and what it is? Do they have an ISO format? Are they experienced in cutting and sewing? Is there experience with a broad spectrum of fabrics that are, believe it or not, many of the shirtweight fabrics that we already have been used on the face and or near the face for decades with no concerns, whether that's balaclavas, shrouds, liners, etc. So look for somebody or a source that is experienced in and also understand that they have some of these standard organizations that they're following behind them, that they're just not knocking these out on the whim, so to speak. With that being said, we didn't intend for our FR fabrics to ultimately be used as cloth face coverings. So when we look at our SDS sheets, what are some of the things that you can see as far as if you're going to breathe around it? We made the decision to use one of the most popular fabrics utilized in North America and honestly worldwide. It's got over 40 years now as far as a track record goes as safely being used in the area. But do know, as far as transparency goes, we never designed these to be wearing for 6-8 hours and breathing through them. So there's still a lot that's not known out there. Just simple fact. So this guy here was pretty easy to convince to go out and give it the good old college try, so to speak, and see how these masks actually affect from a breathing standpoint. So I did two. One of them was just hopping on the old exercise bike. Now, it happened to be we were in the middle of summer, so in the garage it was about 103 degrees. Jumped on there for about 20 minutes, got the heart rate up, started to sweat a little bit. No problem breathing through that. The next one was around Memorial Day. If you're not familiar with who Lieutenant Michael Murphy is and what the Murph Run is, I attempted to do that fully masked. That's a 1 mile run, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, and a 1 mile run while wearing a weighted vest. I say all that to say we got about, by we I mean me, we got about halfway through that and got it a little difficult to breathe through because it absorbed the sweat and it became wet and it was a little tougher to breathe through. So how do I communicate that with my end user community, my wearers, and say, hey, be conscious of your workload. If you're starting to get sweat and you're starting to get moisture in that, it's going to be a little bit difficult to breathe through. If you happen to be out in the elements and it's getting wet and it's getting saturated, be cautious that it's getting and may be difficult to breathe through because your sweat, the rain, the elements now are clogging up the ability for you to breathe through. So just something to be cautious of. And again, with us not knowing what we were up against and what that meant to our wearers, we had to go to some of those inexact ways of figuring stuff out so that we can communicate to those who have to wear these. As we were putting this together and as we were learning a little bit more, we came up with the one big don't do and the 3 things to do when you're dealing with your flame-resistant arc-rated clothing in a coronavirus pandemic. So as we looked at what can we tell folks not to do, the one big don't share your PPE. I mean, if it's as your rubber electrical gloves, if it's your hard hats, face shields, balaclavas, anything that can be considered close to or you may be touching of, we don't want to be sharing it. Now, in our electrical world, where are we going to find that? You're going to find that in your arc flash suits. You're going to find that in your arc flash kits. There's been a concern. Is it an easy fix? Absolutely not. If I have 10, 20 electricians, do I have to go around and buy at least 10 or 20 complete kits? Ideally, yes. Economically feasible? Probably not. Can I get everybody hoods, their individual hoods? Maybe. Now we're down to having to clean and disinfect the various surfaces that are part of and make up those arc flash kits. We definitely don't want to be interchanging with stuff that our hands are touching, aka our electrical gloves, handing over our gloves to anybody from a PPE standpoint. We don't want to do that. And that's a little bit easier. So I highly recommend that you contact your manufacturer, if you haven't already, of your arc flash kits and ask them, what do we need to be doing to sanitize and disinfect these? Now, some of them you can definitely wash. Now, also understand that when these were built, they're not meant to be washed on a daily basis. Prior to this time and age, our arc flash suits, gosh, if you washed them maybe once a month, I'd be surprised. Some facilities I went into, we know that they're not cleaning them on a regular basis. Even though guys are working in them, sweating in them, they just have 2 or 3 sizes for the whole team, and that's how they choose to do that. Now, you may say that's not ideal, but we do know that it exists. So be cautious of that and be very, very cautious of not sharing your PPE. Handling your FR clothing in a COVID world. Number 1, do. If you have no concern that throughout your workday you even feel that you have possible contamination or have come across someone who is potentially giving you cross-contamination, then just follow the manufacturer's guidelines for flame-resistant arc-rated home laundering procedures. Relatively easy to do. It's in that big long tag. It's on the back of your shirt. If not, have it on one of the supplied magnets that sits on the side of your washer and dryer. You don't have to use any chemical additives such as sanitizers, bleach, or things like Lysol. There's no need to isolate clothing beyond the manufacturer's guidelines, which tell you to separate your work clothing, separate your FR from non-FR. So there's no special handling needs necessary for you on a day-to-day basis. If you feel you have no concern, hey, I got in my truck in the morning, I did my job, didn't really come across anybody, have real no concerns that I would have been exposed, and you're good to go. Now, number 2, if you have a contamination concern, first and foremost, follow the CDC guidelines. One of their big things is do not shake clothing. The CDC recommends anyone handling potentially exposed FR clothing wear disposable gloves if possible. If gloves are not available, be sure to wash your hands thoroughly with soap and water for at least 20 seconds after handling. If soap and water is not available, use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer with at least 60% alcohol. All the stuff that should get pretty close to getting ingrained in us over the last 8 to 10 months. Isolate your clothing, get out of your gear away from living areas. If your washer and dryer happens to be in the garage and you lift up that garage door, you are doffing your gear right there in the garage and you're getting it into the washer right away. If you were wearing gloves, remove gloves or wash hands prior and again after. Follow manufacturer's guidelines. Again, even if you have concern, there is no need to add any chemical additives such as sanitizers, bleach, Lysol, anything like that. Special handling. Note, the heat of the water, the agitation in the wash cycle, as well as the chemicals in the detergent work very well to render the virus inactive. If you think about it, if 20 seconds with water and my proper hand washing technique is sufficient to remove it from my hands, 20 to 30 minutes in your wash cycle is definitely enough. And then if you throw it in a dryer for another 20, 30 minutes, you're definitely taking the virus out of the equation in that simple action right there. Handling your equipment and tools. This goes back to the study that we did with cleaning and disinfecting when we're looking at the diluted chlorine bleach. Wear disposable gloves to clean and disinfect, protect those hands, clean surfaces using soap and water, then use disinfectant. Clean with soap and water reduces the number of germs, dirt, and impurities on the surface. Disinfecting kills germs on the surface, does not necessarily remove them. Practice routine cleaning and disinfection of frequently touched surfaces in and around your equipment. More frequent cleaning and disinfection may be required based on the level of use or cross-use if you and your colleagues are using the same piece of equipment multiple times over multiple shifts. Ideally, and again, picture, if you will, one of my utility guys in his bucket truck. I would like for him to pull into the yard, go change out of his flame-resistant arc-rated clothing, because in the yard there is no arc flash hazard. Then if he's going to do any kind of cleaning, disinfecting with stuff that could potentially damage, discolor, anything like that, he's wearing old set of clothes to clean his gear. The other thought is if I need to stay in flame-resistant clothing because I'm still in the proximity of a thermal hazard, aka I'm inside the fence line on my refinery, maybe an old set of coveralls is made available. Maybe we use an old set of coveralls that still have the flame-resistant properties but are less than I would wear on a daily basis, and I put that over top of my very good compliant NFPA 2112 gear, and I protect it that way. Other thoughts are possibly utilizing disposable flame-resistant coveralls for these cleaning type tasks. Any of these would work. And as we showed you earlier, incidental contact, even though not advised under dire conditions that we're dealing with now, it's not detrimental to the point of where we're making the shirts, pants, and coveralls not able to do their job. We still would like you not to have to do any of that. So proper care of your flame-resistant cloth face coverings. Wash all cloth face coverings before use. Wash hands, sanitize before donning. Proper fit over your nose, under chin, snug on the sides, and we know just interacting with our folks on a day-to-day basis, we know this is a huge challenge. We also look at, in our regular PPE world, supplying PPE on how to properly don, doff, and wear PPE. Yes, we probably have to go through a short training on how to properly wear your cloth face covering, because we know folks out there do it incorrectly a lot of the time. So let's make sure we're teaching folks on that. Avoid touching your face while wearing your masks. How to remove a mask depending on how it's set up. We want to be on whether they're the ear loops, whether they're on the string side, whether they're across. We want to remove from the top down, so anything that's on the outside of that is going away from us. And then when we're donning, we just want to reverse that, so from the bottom up. And then obviously wash hands, sanitize hands between each use. So best practices, as we're getting close to wrapping up here, some things to think about, some things that we have learned along the way. The big one, don't share your PPE. That includes hard hats, face shields, arc flash suits, hoods, etc., anything along those lines. Sanitize your PPE primarily by just following the manufacturer's guidelines on laundering. Wear your flame-resistant arc-rated cloth face coverings. Do not replace or substitute for proper PPE. Make sure that we understand that these are not respirators, they are not masks, and they are not substitutes for PPE. This is strictly so that you can adhere to whatever communication your company has let you know about wearing a cloth face covering. Do we want you, anytime that you are within a colleague and you're going to be working together less than 6 feet apart, does that mandate that we have to have a cloth face covering on? If we're in the same building and even though we're 6 feet apart, it's in an enclosed space, we would like everybody to wear cloth face coverings. But because you have exposure to short duration thermal events, you have to up the ante and make sure that those are made with fabrics that will indeed not contribute to injury. And then take care of your PPE so it can take care of you. We have, as many of my colleagues and many of the top companies in North America have done, they've put together some really, really good tools on understanding COVID-19 frequently asked questions as it relates to your flame-resistant arc-rated clothing. There's lots of good resources on folks' websites. I strongly recommend that if you need to, you look there. We, as a marketplace, are more than happy to help. If you need hard copies, if you need PDFs in which you want to make posters of, be more than happy to help anyone looking to do any of that. So with that, there is my contact information. Feel free to make note of that. Feel free to contact me. We're going to have about 14 minutes or so here for some Q&A. If we don't get to your questions, the good folks here send them all along to me. I will get you the answers. If what you ask me is outside my expertise or it's going to take time here to do it, I will just step away from the question at this point and I will answer it later. So if I don't have the resource myself, I will find you the resources and will communicate that with you. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Kay. And again, thank you everybody for taking your time, and hopefully everybody got their one gold nugget out of this and it was worth your while. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thanks, Derek. It looks like we have about 13 or 14 minutes left for questions. Just a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please type it into the chat window on the right side of your screen and send to everyone. Derek, the first question comes from David. I believe he's asking about an earlier slide. Just to confirm, is Bulwark recommending to wear an FR mask under or over the baklava?
Balaclava? So great question. Great question, because the large majority of the balaclavas that are made today, you can actually wear up to, they would be covering your nose and mouth. So would you need to implement a face mask and a balaclava together? I would say you've got two things happening here. If I have a balaclava on and I'm doing electrical work, for example, in a 70E environment, I've got my hard hat on, I've also got my face shield down with my chin cup, and I have my balaclava. If it's up to my nose, covering my mouth, you could easily make the statement and argument, I'm as well covered from a masking cloth face covering as I would be if I had my mask on. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is if I'm in my arc flash suit, would I need to be wearing a cloth face covering, a flame-resistant cloth face covering underneath my hood? I would make the argument again, no, that's my little self-contained environment in there. I don't need to add a cloth face covering and basically putting on a arc flash hood. I would say no. So the caveat would be if I'm wearing my balaclava and it's covering my nose and my mouth, as would my mask, I would say no. If I'm wearing my flame-resistant cloth face covering and my balaclava is at my chin, I would wear the cloth face covering however you are most comfortable. AKA, if I put my balaclava on and then I want to put my cloth face covering over top of that so that my nose is better covered, my mouth is better covered, fine. If I want to put the balaclava over top of that and that's more comfortable for me, I would say fine. But if I'm covering my nose and my mouth with my balaclava, I would then say I don't need to wear the cloth face covering. Derek's personal opinion.
Got it. Thanks, Derek. The next question I have comes from Robert, who asks, are you aware of any burn incidents with face masks?
Not to date. Really good question. Because obviously converting to the FR cloth face covering is to remove meltables and something that could ignite in a short duration thermal event, and it's on my face, probably the last place I would want to incur burn injury because it ignited and or melted. We do know that everything other than what's being made as a FR cloth face covering is having meltables some way in and around it. Either in the fabric itself, it's ignitable, or it's a meltable, and any of the elastic loops and everything that you're seeing out there. So from a non-FR cloth face coverings, I would not trust any of those lightweight fabrics, because my thermal event that I'm dealing with, if I'm an electrician, it's 8 to 5,000 degrees, 18 to 20 inches outside that box where my face is, and I've got a piece of plastic sitting on my face. No, thank you. If I'm in a flash fire environment and I'm dealing with 1,500 to 2,000 degrees for a second and a half to 2 seconds, and I'm introducing something that's lightweight and meltable on my face, no, thank you. So, not that we've seen anything, we've just taken out the potential for something melting and or igniting on our face by introducing the FR cloth face covering, because many of the companies that we were selling our shirts, pants, and coveralls to were now implementing a cloth face covering program based on the response to COVID-19. How can we keep the lights on? How can we still keep refining gas and everybody for everything? We're essential, but I've got to work periodically closer than 6 feet, and I have a short duration thermal exposure. We needed to have face coverings that had the same kind of properties that their shirts, pants, and coveralls had, so they weren't going to contribute to injury.
Okay, great. The next question we have comes from Lisa, who asks, are any studies planned or underway to determine if there are inhalation exposure concerns from any of the material components?
That's a really good question. It's been a little bit of a scramble, as you can imagine, as everybody, especially when we're going through the summer. It's definitely something that I think the industry and the marketplace as a whole would be open to. I would love for someone to feel free to contact me of how we go about looking into getting that done. That would be great, and I'm sure there's a ton of folks listening here that would be able to provide us some kind of direction, because if this does continue and we do go through the next 6 months where there's a lot of hope that some of this will start to dissipate and go away. If this becomes really the new norm and we are going on to this, there is probably some of that that's going to be needed. I think at this current time, I think it may be getting delayed because they're trying to say, okay, are we going to do all that? And then it doesn't become a factor anymore, because we went from never building a mask to 250,000 were being requested from 5 different companies, and no one had any. So part of it was just a response to getting stuff done, and now do we have to then get the backup and that done? I would say if it looks like it's going to continue, that's something we would definitely want to be looking into, not just us, but I think as a marketplace. Great, thanks.
Next question comes from Jessica, who asks, how are the string ends kept from being flammable on the Bulwark cloth mask?
Because they're made with the same material that the mask is actually made of. So they are cut and sewn to be ties, and they're made with the same FR fabric that the actual cloth face covering is made from.
Okay, great. The next question I have is, are the arc-rated face coverings a single layer of material or multiple layers?
in the one that you saw both in the navy and in the khaki that was in my slide, those are both double layered. Per the original, and I'm going all the way to March and April when we started researching going into this, the guidelines at that time was double layer cotton-rich fabrics would be a good approach, and that's what we did in those. Now, I do know that some of my colleagues and some other companies, and I think even one of our recent versions might be single layer, but the ones that were shown there are indeed double layer.
Okay, great. Next question comes from Isabel, who asks, can you explain the limitations for using cloth-based coverings of all natural fibers for FR environments instead of FR cloth-based coverings?
Sure. If you think about it to where that cloth face covering is now the outermost layer. Okay, I am on the floor of my chemical facility. I'm on the floor of my refinery. I'm on my drilling rig. I'm sitting in the bucket truck of my utility vehicle. And we have, in our world, a short duration thermal exposure, which would be a flash fire and or an electric arc flash. That face covering is the outermost layer. If I have not implemented a hard hat and a face shield as I would in 70E, I have exposed something that is ignitable, aka, let's say, 100% cotton mask or cloth face covering, more correctly, with no FR properties. It takes about 400 degrees to ignite cotton. An arc flash is going to start out in that arc gap at significantly higher than 400 degrees. At 18 to 20 inches outside the box, it's still about 5,000 degrees. Your flash fire, whether that's in a chemical facility, on your refinery, or on your rig, is going to be around 2,000 degrees. So your 400-degree ignitable mask will burst into flames, and you don't want that on your face. So with FR properties, it's going to self-extinguish once that event's over. So that short-duration thermal event, just like your shirt, pant, or coverall, you're not on fire. Is it going to eliminate injury? Absolutely not. You just went through a 2,000-degree fireball. You just had an 8,000-degree arc flash happen 20 inches in front of you. Are you going to be hurt? More than likely. How badly? I have no idea. But what I'm taking out of the equation is something that's going to ignite and continue to hurt you after that short-duration thermal exposure is removed. Just the same principle of wearing flame-resistant arc-rated clothing is I don't ignite and continue to burn. I definitely don't want my cloth face covering igniting and continuing to burn on my face.
Okay, thanks, Derek. I think we have time for just one more question. Got someone who's asking, bleach is good at neutralizing the virus. Can I use bleach on my FR?
So we went through a couple of slides. If you had asked me this question before our friend COVID-19 showed up, if you had asked me this question in February as opposed to asking me this question now, I would say absolutely not. We don't want to use chlorine bleach in the wash cycle at any time with our FR clothing, because what it does over time and over multiple launderings is it's going to weaken the fibers, and those fibers are what ultimately protect you. Now, what we've shown here today is accidental, incidental, splash, spill, spray are not going to affect your FR properties short term. If this is something to where, hey, I was out cleaning the truck, I forgot to take off my shirt like I normally do, and I accidentally sprayed myself with some diluted bleach that we're using to clean the truck, does that mean I have to toss my FR away? What we've shown is no, you don't. But that I don't want to be the passport to just go around using chlorine. So in your wash cycle at home, there is no need to add chlorine. We know that hot water, detergent, and agitation plus time will neutralize the virus in and of itself. There is no need to add any other chemical additives to ensure that that happens.
Okay, great. Thanks, Derek. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. My thanks to Derek Singh for his presentation, to Bulwark for sponsoring today's webinar, and to all of our participants. Please be sure to fill out the post-webinar survey to share your feedback. Registration is open for one Synergist product demo coming up next week. On January 19th, please join us for a demonstration focused on shoebox audiometry. Thank you all again, and have a great day.
All right, this actually concludes today's webcast. Thank you all for attending. The recording will be available at aiha.webvent.tv. We will send all registrants an email tomorrow with this link, and please visit our event calendar to sign up for future webcasts.